Right then, in this video I'll be connecting a parallel 185mm copper supply. The challenge here is the use of connector blocks in a tight enclosure as opposed to, say, a cable lug, as the connectors give you the unique challenge of actually bending the cables into them, whereas with a lug you can kind of present them to the buzz bar. I think it's good practice obviously to leave slack where possible, and what I've done is I've made these cables off a little bit longer than they need to be and then pulled them up and fixed them in place, so in the scenario where there is a possible bad connection they can be dropped down and made off again. Or alternatively, that block of connectors, and this is what I realized I could have done to make my life easier, is sort of removable and you can move it up or down. So had I dropped it down a little bit, I would have given myself more space and it would have been a lot easier to connect them in. However, saying that, if you look at the service feed, that's actually looped into the connectors, and at that point I was undecided what I was going to do, and with the cable already being fixed in place, I decided I'm just going to leave the slack in the enclosure and move on from there. It's kind of like this dilemma often where you have the regs and then you have sort of common sense, and you've got this scenario, you've got limited space and you've got a big cable. I mean, what do you do? So I'm going to work back to front here, starting with the earths that are fortunately with cable lugs. It's quite easy and they're smaller actually than the actual line conductors. The earth is a 95mm conductor and I'm going to crimp it using the L-Press battery powered hydraulic crimping tool. The lug is tinned copper. It's an aluminium buzz bar in a dry environment, and perhaps you don't need in this scenario contact grease, especially with it being an earth, but I think it's good practice regardless to put some, and that's what I'm going to do here. I'm familiar with steel wire armoured, but I don't know, is this practice of making cables off where you put sort of a sleeving on the earth common across Europe, because it's typical here for bigger cables. So just jumping ahead slightly now, I've made off the back cable, it's all in, it went pretty smoothly, and we'll pick up where I'm making off the neutral now and talk through the process. Later I had some problems with one of the other conductors and that's shown in the video, and we'll go through how I solved it and what the issue was. So it's really important with this size cable that you don't cut it too short. You really want to creep up on the length. Just take your time with it, measure it off a little bit longer than it needs to be, and if you have to, you can always cut it down. And with this scenario, you need that extra length to give you the play to actually bend the cable in to the connector. If you measure it off exactly what it needs to be, you're going to come up short, I can guarantee it. So again, this is sector cable, and this manufacturer is the same manufacturer as the lugs that we often use, and they instruct that the cable needs to be reformed into a more circular shape. It's being fire rated cable. There's the fireproof fabric underneath the insulation that protects against potential short circuits in the event of a fire. It's quite interesting how the cable is constructed. To help remove the last of the fireproof layer, I usually take a brass brush to the metal. It just helps clean it up and is obviously going to improve conductivity. So herein lies the challenge, and I mean, that's quite a considerable bend I've had to put into the cable to try and get it to go inside the connector. Here I think I've probably made it off too long, so I'm just shortening the cable a little bit to help me get it in and lessen the angle that it needs to go in at. If you look again, that's quite a bend I've put into the cable there, but it's necessary. You might think perhaps it's too long, but if you look later, its length is actually pretty good. But once the head of the conductor has cleared the first part of the connector, then you use that extra length that you have in your favor and push the bend out, straighten the cable, and that'll force the conductor inside the connector. It seems I might have made a schoolboy error here and not fully opened the connector, so I'm just loosening it off and going to repeat the process. I don't appear to be happy with something here, so I'm just going to take the front part of the connector off and undo the bolt and have a look and make sure I've actually cleared the connection part. And it seems I just need to ease it in a little bit further, so I took a strap, wrapped it around the conductor, and that enabled me to pull it forward while pushing it back and just work it in a little bit further. But it's gone in, and I think the length is pretty ideal. I definitely think this type of connection is more difficult than a cable lug to execute once you actually know what you're doing. These connectors actually require quite a large amount of torque for an 8mm Allen key. It's like 46 Newton meters or something, so you really need to make sure that the tool is fully engaged. And to avoid the error that I did have later, what I should have done when tightening them was remove all the covers. So what you can see here is the plastic cover on the connector isn't fully seated. So what it's done is it's pushed the Allen key head or the tool out of the bolt, and it's not fully engaged, and I've ended up rounding out the head of the bolt. But luckily it wasn't that bad. So with it being just the first couple of mil of engagement, I decided that I should try and fix it rather than change the connector, and it actually worked out pretty well. Just gave it a tippy tap, worked it in a little bit. I could see that it was going, but because it's rounded out, it just wasn't fully engaging. So I used the torque wrench a little bit to ease it again into the correct orientation. A little whack with a hammer, and it was fully home then. I didn't baby it either now when tightening it. I really wanted to make sure that I got good engagement and really tightened it down, and that I wasn't sort of shafting somebody potentially later on who had to maybe service this or whatever. I got there in the end though. I think if I did this again, I'd probably not connect them in the same order again, because I think it could have been neater, but it is what it is. Anyway, thanks for watching.